Hello and welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's master session. I'm Taher ELHOUARI, and it's truly a pleasure to be here with such a strong community of cybersecurity professionals, CISOs, auditors, trainers, and consultants. Many of you are already seasoned experts and professionals in the industry, and this session is designed to match that level, but also to structure our collective understanding on a solid and universal foundation. So, the title of today's session is From Chaos to Control: Understanding, Building, and Maturing Your Cyber Response Team, with the subtitle of CERTs, CSIRTs, and the Architecture of Cyber Resilience. That's because cyber response isn't just a technical process, it is an architectural function in the resilience of our digital ecosystems. In this masterclass, we'll go beyond definitions. We will understand the distinctions between CERT and CSIRT, dive into global models and best practices, learn how to design and operate an effective team. We will explore some maturity models and walk through real world cases that show how CSIRTs respond when it matters most. So, by the end of the session, I want you to be able to build, assess, or even mature as CSIRT in any environment, whether it's national, sectoral, or enterprise, and align it with global standards and frameworks such as the ISO 27035, NIST SP 800-61, ENISA's guidelines, and so on. So, no further ado, let's begin. Before we dive into the technical content, a brief introduction. I'm Taher ELHOUARI. I have spent over 15 years working across the cyber and information security landscapes, from offensive security to defensive operations and to GRC, from field level incident response to board level risk communication. I'm also the founding president of three nonprofit organizations: the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, the Cloud Security Alliance, and the Conformity Assessment Society Algeria chapters, where we help promote security best practices in the region. I'm also the founder of EKSEC Group, a cyber company consulting, auditing, advisory, and training, operating across Algeria, the UK, and the US. I trained and mentored over 500 professionals in ISO, GRC, incident response, penetration testing, and so on. I'm also involved in some other roles globally as an EC Council Advisory Boards member and a distinguished cyber subject matter expert with ISC2. So this session is not only about theory, it's built from experience, audits, breaches, drills, crisis handling, and maturity assessments in the real world. So let's now jump into what you came for, an expert dive into building, understanding, and maturing both CSIRTs and CERTs. So let's take a moment to align expectations and get you familiar with the roadmap of today's masterclass. This session is not just theoretical, it's designed to provide you with practical and usable knowledge that you can use at the moment or in the near future. So whether you are part of a SOC, a national agency, a bank, a private company, the concepts and models we discussed today apply across the board. Here is what we will walk away with: a complete understanding of certs and CSIRTs, what they do and how they differ, how real world CSIRTs are structured globally, internal, national, sectoral, and so on, how to apply also international frameworks such as the ISO, NIST, or others to your environment, also a blueprint for building a CSIRT, people, process, and technology, or the PPT thing, which I'm sure that the majority already are familiar with, the ability to evaluate your CSIRT's maturity using SIM3 or ENISA models. And finally, we will walk through a few real cases to ground all of this in reality. So the session is broken into around 8 chapters, beginning with why cyber response matters and ending with a Q&A where you can leave your questions in the comments in the video or in our publications, and then we will do our best to answer in time. So let's dive in with chapter one. So why cyber response matters in the first place? So let's ground this discussion with it. So because this is not about having another department. It's about something much more bigger that we can call organizational survival. Cyber threats today are faster, more targeted, and increasingly destructive. We are dealing with, as you all know, RAS or ransomware as a service, supply chain compromises, data leaks through cloud misconfigs as an example, national state threat actors, AI generated phishing attacks, and so on. So, what happens when an organization gets breached, especially without a CSIRT? Like incidents go undetected for weeks, nobody knows who is in charge, evidence is lost or mishandled, communications are chaotic, regulators intervene, customers and partners lose trust, and the list goes on and on. So that's what we mean by chaos. Now imagine we having a CSIRT in place. It receives and triages the incident, immediately activates the ERP, which is called as the incident response plan, notifies stakeholders and isolates systems, conducts forensics or the fire, so digital forensics and incident response, RCA exercises, root cause analysis, reports, and remediates in alignment with the policy and the regulation at the same time. And obviously, at the end, we document the lessons learned. So it simply turns chaos into control. And this is not just best practice, it's required by frameworks such as, or standards such as ISO 27035, which defines structured incident response. The NIST special publication 800-61, it's a very famous one. It guides technical and operational response. We also have the European Union Agency, ENESA, which oversees national sectoral CSIRTs in the EU. We have, as an example, the NIS2 regulation in Europe, which mandates structured reporting and readiness. We have DORA, and so on and so on. Even the GDPR or the 1807 law in Algeria in terms of data protection and incidents related to data privacy and protection. So we also have maturity models such as the SIM3, which assess whether a CSIRT is reactive, managed, or strategic. So in short, you don't respond to incidents because you want to, but you do it because it's necessary for trust, compliance, and also survival in nowadays world. And this is why the CSIRT is the heart of modern cyber defense. So now let's explore what a CSIRT really is and how it differs from the older CERT terminology. So now that we have established why cyber response is critical, let's define what a CSIRT truly is, because many people, like still confuse it with a SOC or an IT help desk function, and so on and so on. So a CSIRT is not just a team that reacts to incidents. It's a bit much more bigger than that. It's a formalized strategic capability recognized and documented across international standards, the ones that we already mentioned. We also have others, such as the FIRST, or the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams CSIRT Services Framework, the global reference for CSIRT functions, and we also have the ITU TX.1056 for the development of a cyber defense center. So it's built on defined responsibilities, trained personnel, integrated processes, capable technology, and authority to act. The CSIRT is not optional nowadays. It's central to cyber risk governance, incident escalation, and also regulatory compliance. So the CSIRT as Computer Security Incident Response Team. In its, let's say, core mission, it's fourfold. So detect, first of all, detection. So detect and analyze incidents, whether internally or from the already established SOC, which is known as the Security Operations Center. We also have the second thing, which is respond, which is about responding in a structured and timely way. Third things is recover. So recover services and operations with minimal disruption. This is also related to business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning, and so on. And then the fourth phase is learn. So you have to learn from incidents to prevent reoccurrence, and which is also a form of continual improvement if we follow the PDCA, the manual approach. So it also coordinates between the technical teams, legal and compliance teams, public relations, and single leadership as well, ensuring a unified response and avoiding chaos. A mature CSIRT is not just reactive, it has to become proactive player in the organization's security posture. So we'll dive deeper into what a CSIRT actually does in the next slide, based on the global reference of first CSIRT services framework. And this is the CSIRT roles and responsibilities according to the first services framework. So let's now explore the actual services that a CSIRT is expected to deliver based on the official first framework in its latest edition version 2.1. Unlike simplified models, this framework organizes responsibilities under five high-level service areas, each of which contains specific services which themselves include functions and optional sub-functions. We have, first things first, information security event management. And this is extremely important in terms of visibility. So this area focuses on the upstream detection pipeline, including sensor log management, alerting, use case design, event qualification, and so on. So it often overlaps with the SOC, but it differs in analysis depth and context handling. And usually people keep this at the SOC level and then escalate it to the CSIRT. So, it depends on the organizational context. Second thing is information security incident management. And this is the heart or the operational heart of the CSIRT. So it's about managing reports, triaging incidents, coordinating stakeholders, performing forensics, supporting containment, and leading the post-incident recovery. It also includes crisis communication and media coordination where needed, of course. Third thing is vulnerability management, and this is where the CSIRT interacts with the PSIRT function, and we will get back to PSIRTs in a couple of minutes, the Product Security Incident Response team. The team may handle vulnerability discovery, whether it's internal or external, triage the risk alongside the vulnerability, obviously, coordinate stakeholder responses, and engage in responsible disclosure with vendors, researchers, editors, and so on. Fourth thing is situational awareness. So a mature CSIRT must operate with context, and this area focuses on collecting and synthesizing intelligence or CTI, cyber threat intel, logs, indicators, policy alignment, environmental risks, and threat actor behaviors, whether it's TTPs, as we all know, techniques, tactics, and procedures. So it supports early detection, response prioritization, and internal communication. And the final thing in the CSIRT's roles and responsibilities is knowledge transfer. So a CSIRT also plays a key role in organizational resilience. As an example, this can include building awareness, running training, simulation exercises, guiding other departments, as an example, BCP, disaster recovery, and so on, and developing policy advisory services. Now, in more details, this is the whole CSIRT services framework with its five service areas: InfoSec event management, InfoSec incident management, vulnerability management, situational awareness, and knowledge transfer with more details. So next, we'll examine how the CSIRT fits within the broader cyber ecosystem, whether it's a SOC, GRC, public relations, DevSecOps, and so on. So the CSIRT in the cybersecurity ecosystem. So let's now try to understand where CSIRT fits in the bigger picture, because it cannot and must not operate in a silo. A CSIRT's effectiveness depends on its position, relationships, and integration with the rest of the organization and its external environment. So let's walk through each connection. First things first, we have from the SOC to the CSIRT. The SOC is usually the monitoring arm, so it detects anomalies, raises alerts, and then escalates to the CSIRT when those alerts are validated. And the CSIRT takes over for deeper investigation, coordination, and most importantly, response in case of incidents, of course. We also have the NOC, the Network Operations Center. So how does the CSIRT fits in with the NOC? So from the NOC to the CSIRT. So the NOC helps with isolation, rerouting, system restoration, infrastructure analysis, and so on. Usually, with system administrators, network administrators, and so on. So CSIRTs must work with the NOC during the response, especially in OT and AICS environments. So in operational technology and industrial and automation control systems. Then we also have GRC, or the ISMS, the Information Security Management System, to the CSIRT. So, risk and compliance teams must receive incident trends, metrics, and also lessons learned because, this will help with the incident register, with the risk register, with compliance efforts, with management systems such as the ISMS, and so on. So the CSIRT will feedback, or the CSIRT's feedback, sorry, will inform, as we said, risk registers, control audits, and so on, and also the continual improvement process of the ISO 27001. Now, from legal to CSIRT, when incidents cross legal thresholds, such as data breaches under GDPR, as an example, or even the Algerian 1807 law for personally identifiable information data protection, the CSIRTs work with legal to support notification, evidence handling, compliance, and so on. We also have from public relationships and communications to the CSIRT. So during high impact incidents, CSIRTs must communicate with corporate communications teams to ensure consistent messaging, avoid panic, of course, and preserve reputation for sure, especially in terms of companies and, the harsh reality of the corporate world. Management and board to CSIRT. CSIRTs must provide, leadership with timely and accurate briefings to support business continuity decisions, as an example. So executive involvement is vital during crisis scenarios, and usually this is done from the CSIRT to the CISO and then to the management or to the board level or the BOD, the board of directors. And then HR or human resources, when insider threats, misconduct, or personnel based incidents occur, HR are the go to. They must collaborate on investigation, evidence, and response, of course. So everyone can be an interested party in the cyber ecosystem around the computer security incident response team. And then we have CERTs, law enforcement, sectoral CSIRTs, and so on. So in a national, sectoral, or transnational scenario, sorry, CSIRTs coordinate with trusted parties to share, such as an example, IOCs, or even with ISACs, with Information Sharing and Analysis Center, in order to share indicators of compromise, indicators of attack, and so on and so on, coordinate response, and issue joint alerts like the big players or the big cyber agencies in the world, in the US, the UK, Australia, France, and so on. So these relationships are described in the ENISA CSIRT capability framework and operationalized in CERT CMM, the computer emergency response team capability maturity model, like external interfaces, organizational cooperation, and the collaboration capability. So a CSIRT's success depends not only on technical ability, of course, because cyber is not only technical about abilities and also information security. It's about the whole PPT ecosystem, whether it's people, processes, and technology, of course. So a CSIRT depends on its integration organizationally, legally, and most importantly, strategically. So in the next slide, we'll distinguish CSIRTs from PSIRTs, which are often confused but serve entirely different missions. So research versus research, understanding the differences. Like one of the most common misconceptions I see nowadays, even in large enterprises, is the confusion between a CSIRT and a PSIRT. While both are incident response teams, in fact, their focus, stakeholders, and outputs are usually completely different. So let's break it down. A CSIRT deals with incidents affecting the organization's internal environment, its networks, systems, people, operations, and so on. And this includes ransomware, phishing, malware outbreaks, insider threats, and more and more. The list goes on. But a PSIRT is focused on products and software. It is a product security incident response team. So, especially customer facing code, firmware, or hardware developed by the company like Microsoft, Google, TikTok, and so on. They handle security flaws, vulnerability reports, and coordinated disclosures. So, if you're a software or hardware vendor, think as an example Cisco, Microsoft, and so on. Your PSIRT is responsible for like accepting vulnerability reports from researchers and bug bounty and stuff, validating and triaging them, assigning CVEs with CNAs and the respective organizations, issuing security advisories, releasing patches, and so on. And for example, their work is governed by ISO 30111 and ISO 29147 and not the 2735 for incident response, and CSIRT or incident management team EMT. So meanwhile, CSIRTs handle broader incident coordination across the enterprise, work with SOCs and external CSIRT/CERTs, and they engage in real-time incident containment and investigation. So both teams are critical, but they just serve different missions and different objectives. So in large organizations, they must be aligned, obviously, especially when a vulnerability in a product is actively, as an example, being exploited in the wild, zero-day exploitation. And this is when the CSIRT and PSIRT must share intel, align disclosures, and act in coordination. So three things matter the most. I call them the three C's: collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. We can also make them four C's by adding communication too. So in the next slides, we'll move from comparison to history. And this is the provoking point. So how the term CERT originated and why many now prefer CSIRT. So the historical context, terminology, and legal considerations. So now that we have compared CSIRTs and PSIRTs, let's go back in time, take a step back, understand the origin of the terms CERT and CSIRT, because this isn't just a naming issue, it's a legal and operational distinction. So if we go back to history, the term CERT or Computer Emergency Response Team was born in 1988 when the Morris worm infected over 10%, something like that, of the internet in a single day. So the US DoD or the US Department of Defense and DARPA asked the Carnegie Mellon University, called as CMU, to create a centralized response capability, which led to the creation of the CERT Coordination Center known as CERT-CC. So CERT-CC remains a major player in incident coordination and vulnerability handling. However, they also trademarked the term CERT, and its use is legally controlled for your information. So if you are a government or national entity, you may be allowed to use CERT, for example, CERT TN in Tunisia, CERT FR in France, and so on and so on. And also we have the Africa CERT for regional coordination in the African continent. But if you are a private company, a multi-sector organization, or international team, it's more preferably and most likely you will adopt the term of CSIRT, which stands for Computer Security Incident Response Team, because this term was designed to be legally neutral, globally adaptable, and flexible enough for all kinds of response teams, whether they are internal, hybrid, virtual, outsourced, or distributed. And today, organizations like FIRST, ENISA, TFC CERT, and also some standards and frameworks, they exclusively use the term CSIRT as the preferred term. And there are still valid uses of CERT, but unless you are a national or academic body aligned with CMU, you are better off using CSIRT, to avoid all legal problems. So now that we have cleared the legal and naming confusion, let's move on to the different implementation models of CSIRTs, whether they are centralized, distributed, hybrid, sectoral, and national. So to simplify and to resume this provoking subject of CERT and CSIRT, they are the same thing. They just operate under different names, and preferably we go with a CSIRT. So types of CSIRTs and first classification and implementation models. So to clarify our previous taxonomy and ground it in first official guidance, because the first, is the global forum for incident response and security teams, and they have very interesting projects, by the way. So here are the 5 recognized types of CSIRTs, as defined in, I think, the Annex 5, I believe, of the first CSIRT services framework. Each of these plays a vital role in the global cyber ecosystem, and they often interoperate during large-scale events. So a national CSIRT, these are government-mandated entities usually, whether it's like CERT-FR, CERT-TN, CERT-DZ as an example, and so on, responsible for national level coordination. And they serve the entire country, including critical infrastructure, civil society, government agencies, and sometimes private industry too. So they also act as trusted contact point for cross-border coordination. Then we have the sectoral CSIRT. Usually it's for critical infrastructures focused on specific sectors like finance, energy, healthcare, telecommunication, and so on. And these CSIRTs provide a vertical specific expertise, issue sectoral alerts, and often report to both national CSIRTs and the regulators. As an example, VFS ISAC, ISACs in the US, Africa CERT, sectoral efforts, and so on. Three, we have enterprise organizational CSIRT, and this is what most companies implement. It handles internal security incidents affecting the organization's systems, users, services, and data. And it may be centralized or even distributed depending on its organizational structure and size, of course. So examples, the Microsoft CSIRT, the EBM team, and so on and so on, other private CSIRTs, such as in France, or huge leading banks, and so on. We also have in the fourth place regional or multi-party CSIRT. And these CSIRTs are formed to serve multiple organizations or jurisdictions in a shared region or ecosystem. Think of it much like a regional CSIRT for a set of public agencies or a group of universities, as an example. And they act as a shared coordination hub, often with cross-border links. And finally, the PSIRT, or the Product Security Incident Response Team that we just talked about and covered this earlier. And these teams are embedded in product development organizations, and they handle security vulnerabilities in software or hardware, coordinate disclosure, issue advisories and patches, and so on. So these CSIRT types are not mutually exclusive because a large multinational may operate an enterprise CSIRT, coordinate with a sectoral CSIRT, and even run its own internal PSIRT as well. So when setting up a CSIRT, knowing which type you are building, who your constituency is, and what model fits your context is foundational. So let's now move to the next stage, understanding how to measure CSIRT capability maturity using SIM3, CERT-CMM, and SOC-CMM2. So why this matter first? Because it will help align the CSIRT improvement with organizational strategy, identify functional gaps, whether it's in people, processes, and technology and tools, support structured enhancements and benchmarking, and prepare teams for formal um, accreditation slash certification or external trust building. So we previously mentioned multiple maturity models, but upon verification, usually we have primarily these two. We have the SIM3 and we have the SOC CMM adapted for CERT, which is called SOC CMM for CERT. So the SIM3 is developed by the TFC CERT, and it's used in the Trusted Introducer program. It measures 5 maturity domains of incident response: strategic, operational, continuous improvement capabilities. And it ranges from level 0, non existent, to level 4, optimized in terms of maturity level. On the other hand, we have the SOC CMM for CERT, and this is extremely useful and well known. I personally prefer it. It is a specialized adoption of the broader SOC CMM model that has been tailored specifically to assess CSIRT operational and process maturity. And this model evaluates your team's maturity across multiple dimensions, including services, governance, staffing, tooling, and so on, with maturity levels similar to ISO levels from 0 to 5. And these two models are usually the most widely adopted and validated internationally and align with frameworks such as the ISO 27035 and the first CSIRT services framework. And they are powerful tools for mapping your CSIRT's current and target capabilities in terms, like in doing a gap assessment or something. So in the upcoming slides, we'll explore SIM3 in detail and also followed by a closer look at the SOC CMM for CERT. So now that we have compared CSIRTs and PSIRTs, let's go back in time to understand um, the origin of maturity model and the structured maturity for CSIRT. So the SIM3, which stands for Security Incident Management Maturity Model. It's as we said, developed by the TFC, sir, the Trusted Introducer. Its purpose is to assess and benchmark the maturity level of a CSIRT, and it's used for self-assessment, continuous improvement, and also the Trusted Introducer certification. In terms of domains, it has four key domains: organizational, everything related to governance, authority, charters, and so on; human, whether it's staff roles, skills, and trainings; tools, the availability and quality of tooling, logs, communication, and so on; and also processes, obviously, in terms of documentation, incident handling, and so on. And its level of maturity go from 4 to 0, a bit similar to the NIST approach. So the model evaluates, I believe, 44 parameters across four key domains, and each parameter is then rated from 0 to 4, from completely missing, not implemented, to optimized and fully integrated in its level 4. So this model is not theoretical. It's actively used to evaluate teams aiming for accreditation under the Trusted Introducer scheme, and it helps CSIRTs benchmark their readiness, improve capabilities, and structure their long-term evolution. So what's particularly strong about SIM3 is how it aligns with other frameworks, such as the 2735 of ISO, the NIST CSF, and even ITIL for incident handling processes. So we will look at a few of these parameters in detail later. The SOC CMM, on the other hand, originally designed to assess security operation centers and has been adapted with great effectiveness for CSIRT maturity assessment. The third version includes all the key domains of governance, processes, tools, people, and services, but its indicators are carefully tailored to reflect research responsibilities like incident handling, stakeholder engagement, CTI integration, lessons learned, and so on and so on. Now, some examples and benefits, strengths, and takeaways from real world CSIRTs: what works, what fails, and why. So these examples cover enterprise, regional, and national CSIRTs. CERT EU as an example, Singapore's GovTech CSIRT show how large institutions structure the response at scale. We can take the first case as an example. Uh, Norsk Hydro in 2019, Enterprise CSIRT in crisis. The context of that case, major ransomware attack, the Locker Goga paralyzed IT systems worldwide. The presence of the CSIRT team, their response was segmented. They segmented the affected systems and activated both plans of disaster recovery and business continuity, used alternative communication channels, to email outage, and transparent public communication through press briefings, updates, and so on. So the takeaways from this case is that crisis drills and fallback systems save the response, and mature CSIRT enabled calm, fast, and coordinated actions. And transparency is also a very important factor in terms of building trust with public and stakeholders. And on the other hand, the CERT EU, the institutional CERT serving the European Union, protects EU institutions, agencies, and bodies from cyber threats, real-time monitoring, threat intel fusion, and so on and so on. And the takeaways were inter-institutional systems require political and technical trust, and threat sharing mechanisms multiply cyber resilience, of course. We also have the Colonial Pipeline and the Singapore GovTech example, which is about securing digital government. So the context was about protecting national digital government services and the smart nation infrastructure. So their characteristics, it was fully integrated with their SNDGO, the Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. It has a hybrid team model, a SOC plus a CSIRT plus, I believe, a DevSecOps. And they focus on multiple things such as IP security, platform resilience, public cloud security, and so on and so on. So this sector-specific CSIRT must evolve with the digital transformation, and integrating DevSecOps and threat intel obviously increases its operational, technical, and also tactical effectiveness. In the fourth case, for the Colonial Pipeline in 2021, They didn't have a mature CSIRT. They faced a ransomware attack, forced shutdown of fuel pipeline serving the US East Coast. It's kind of a famous incident. You can search about it in the internet. The failure points were no formal incident response governance, delayed decision making, communication breakdown, and I think they paid something around $4.4 million in ransom without the coordinated analysis. So the impact was national emergency declared, fuel panic, brand damage, and you can imagine the worst case scenario. So the lesson learned was that ad hoc teams are not CSIRTs. Maturity, training, and structure are essential. So even if technical talent exists, the absence of structure leads to delays, poor decisions, and national scale consequences. In terms of common factors of high impact CSIRTs, the common success factors across the board: governance, authority, defined services, and so on. Because we can take some examples from this slide. So, a clear mission and authority will obviously enable swift action without confusion. Everyone understands their role, their responsibilities, and so on. Formal governance and sponsorship as well. Top down support ensures resources and the legitimacy of the different operations and processes. When you have defined services and playbooks, they will obviously ensure consistency, coordination, training value, and so on. Threat intel integration is something incredibly important nowadays. It enables contextual response, faster decision making, and so on. We can go also for cross-sector collaboration because essential for national and sectoral impact. No CSIRT is an island. Collaboration and cooperation are two extremely important things in combating um, cyber threats nowadays. So, and the list goes on and goes on, even for other teams like SOC and DevSecOps, continuous drills, and so on. And perhaps most critically, post-incident learning to evolve the team's effectiveness. Now, how do you actually build a CSIRT, whether you are in a government, a bank, a cloud provider, or a critical infrastructure operator? The structure may differ, but the foundation is the same. So let's walk through the six key phases of building a fully functional and impactful CSIRT. Um, This is a CSIRT implementation roadmap from strategy to operationalization. So phases of CSIRT implementation. This methodology was built inside our company at EKSEC, and I was principally leading this small methodology in terms of building CSIRTs, going from our experience in building, assessing, and maturing different CSIRT teams, whether nationally or internationally. Initiation and mandate, scoping and governance, design and architecture, capability development, operationalization, and maturity and continuous improvement. So, first things first is the initiation and mandate. And this methodology is still a work in progress. It's still not completely operational, but hopefully it will be coming very soon. So, initiation and mandate. You need to obtain the executive buy-in because without strategic mandate, the CSIRT will lack power, will lack authority, and this is not something that you want, for your CSIRT. So you have to define clear mission, objectives, and they have to be aligned also with organizational risk profile in terms of organizational level CSIRT. So you have to decide, why do we need a CSIRT? What are we trying to protect? You need clear answers to these questions before you even present that project probably to your board or to your top management. So ensure this is formalized by the end of the day and ideally as part of risk or security governance programs. The second thing is about scoping and governance. So define the constituency, internal organizational units, subsidiaries, entire sectors, and so on. And then choose the type of the CSIRT that you're trying to build, whether it is enterprise level, sectoral, national, or product focused for a PSIRT. So establish then reporting lines and oversight mechanisms. CISO, CIO, external agencies, regulators, ministries, and so on. Decide between internal only versus hybrid CSIRT that has a collaboration with the SOC, with the other certs, and so on and so on. and then assign legal compliance and also regulatory responsibilities. Then comes the third phase about the design and the architecture part. So define services to be offered based on the first framework. Since it already exists, we take it directly and use it. There is no need to, recreate the wheel. So example, incident handling, threat intel, coordination, and so on, and then map to reference models such as the SIM3, SOC CMM for CERT, NIST, ISO, and so on. And then develop the core documents. The CSIRT charter, it's extremely important, policies and procedures, service catalog, escalation matrix, and so on. And luckily, in our industry, we already have so many frameworks that you can use as a starting point. The fourth point is capability development. So recruit or assign skilled CSIRT staff, whether from the internal teams or recruit directly from external providers, or you can outsource, the function directly into an MDR or an MSSP, so a managed security services provider. So with profiles across the fire, digital forensic incident response, VAPT, threat analysis, communication, and so on. And then you obviously need to do some capacity building, so provide training, certifications, initiatives, chapters, webinars, workshops, and so on. And then you need to set up the tooling. Some of the most important tools: case management system, threat intel platform, the SIEM store integration, forensic tools, knowledge base, sharing portals, and the list goes on and on in terms of tooling and technology, whether it's software or hardware, of course. The fifth phase is operationalization. So launch with a soft start or pilot, a limited scope or specific constituency. So test the run books and SOPs, the standard operating procedures with tabletop exercises, TTX, simulated incidents, and so on and so on. And then establish communication channels, hotlines, ticketing, and secure communications. Of course, you will be sharing critical and confidential data. So obviously, your communication has to be extremely studied well in terms of sharing and communicating and so on. And then conduct awareness workshops with stakeholders. And in these things, the first can help you. They already have the TLP white framework or the TLP framework, the CSIRT services framework, the PSIRT services framework, and so on and so on. And sixth phase, and finally, the maturity and continuous improvement. So benchmark and do maturity assessments by using SIM3, 6CMM, or others, or specific custom ones. Engage in regular gap assessments and capability evaluations. Integrate with other cyber functions, SOC, GRC, and so on. Join trust networks such as FIRST, TFC CERT, Africa CERT, ESACs, national alliances, chapters, and so on. Establish a lessons learned process after incidents and simulations. This will be it will bring you huge advantages, believe me. And then publish quarterly or annual CSIRT reports, for transparency, strategic value, national alignment, and so on. So building a CSIRT summary. You need the strategic mandate, the executive buy-in, CSIRT mission and funding. Then you need to define constituency, reporting, regulatory links, and CSIRT type, service catalog, charter, SLAs, policies, stakeholder engagement, hiring tool setup, knowledge base, and so on, SOPs, simulation, secure comms, and finally benchmarking and continuous improvement. The PDCA lifecycle can still be very useful in this context. And then we have the CSIRT maturity pyramid. It's also a framework that we are working on. It's still in progress. And this layered pyramid reflects how a CSIRT evolves from small incident handling cell to a national or sector-wide capability aligned with international frameworks. So the maturity levels draw from SIM3 and SOC-CMM logic, where each layer builds upon the one below and driving more capability, governance, and trust. So you have level one, initial setup; level two, formalized structure; level three, operational and measurable; then integrated with SOC GRC, continuous optimization, and then the strategic influence. So our EK6 is third capability maturity pyramid from initial setup to strategic impact. So the objective of the first level is to establish the foundational components to enable incident response capability. And at this stage, the organization is just beginning to acknowledge the need for a CSIRT. There is no clear structure, mandate, or defined services. And the response to incidents is reactive and often, ad hoc. and driven by urgent need rather than planned operations. So you'll find minimal documentation, no formal processes, and no dedicated tools, often just emails, spreadsheets, and so on. And this level is the most fragile and risk prone, but it's where many organizations begin. You have to begin with what you have, especially in emerging markets. So the danger here is that without formalization, the team remains ineffective and vulnerable to failure when faced with a large scale or coordinated and targeted. Level 2 represents the first major step forward. Here, a formal mandate is issued, often as a result of regulatory pressure, leadership awareness, or past incidents. So, the CSIRT begins defining its scope, developing its charter or policy, and starts drafting a basic service catalog. And we begin to see the formation of a team, even if partially dedicated. There is growing stakeholder involvement and management starts allocating budget and support and so on. So while maturity is still low, this level represents a commitment to building capabilities systematically. Level 4, at this point, the CSIRT becomes fully operational. Level 3, sorry. So processes are repeatable, standard operating procedures are in place, a clear incident lifecycle is established, from detection to response, recovery, and so on. Tools like ticketing systems, log aggregators, and CDI feeds are now integrated, and teams conduct post-incident reviews, and we start seeing the introduction of KPIs, SLAs, incident metrics, and so on. So the CSIRT's value becomes tangible across the organization, and its role is understood by almost every single interested party, IT, legal, business units, and so on. And this level is often a checkpoint for internal or external audit slash assessments. And, it begins to align with the different standards and frameworks that exist. Level 4 is all about integration. It's the key word in this level. So the CSIRT no longer operates in isolation. It's deeply embedded within the organization's broader cyber and risk governance fabric. Level 4, the CSIRT collaborates seamlessly with the SOC, GRC, legal, privacy, BC/DR teams, and so on. Tools like SOAR, threat modeling, automated playbooks begin to. And we also start seeing external collaboration with sector-specific ISACs, industry peers, national CSIRTs, and so on. So this level signifies strategic coordination and starts to link security incidents, business risk, and reputation of course. The level 5 is the continuous optimization. This is where the CSIRT becomes proactive, predictive, and dynamic. Teams use metrics, root cause analysis, and threat intel not just for reporting, but for driving improvement. They run cyber drills, red team, purple team engagements, regulatory update playbooks based on lessons learned, and so on. They also might be involved in DevSecOps, threat hunting, forensics, and so much more at national or international levels. And what's important here is the shift from operating the CSIRT to managing it as a continuous improvement program. And maturity assessments using SIM3, SOCCMM, and so on are part of annual plans, and executive reporting becomes more refined and risk focused. So think of it as a very optimal level. And finally, level 6, and only, and I say again, only a very small handful of CSIRTs globally reach this stage. These are national level, sector wide, or global leaders who drive cyber beyond their own organization. They actively contribute to national cyber policies, support capacity building in their region, publish guidance, and serve as a model for others. Think of first members as an example, founding members of the CSIRT or CSIRT that lead their country's coordination during major crises. And at this level, CSIRTs don't just respond to incidents, they shape how the ecosystem responds, mentor other teams, and influence international best practices. And this should be, hopefully, the ultimate goal of the EK6 CSIRT strategy if you want to lead regionally in terms of CSIRT creation and capability maturity evolvement, whether it's initial setup or to the optimal level of strategic impact. So, enabling the mission, tools, technologies for effective CSIRT operations. You cannot have a CSIRT nowadays without, you know, the handful toolbox package of technologies, tools, and so on. So a CSIRT is simply and obviously only as effective as its people, processes, and the technology stack that enables them. And this slide dives into the foundational and advanced tools that every CSIRT should consider across different capability areas. So whether you are an enterprise CSIRT, sectoral CSIRT, national level, and so on, technology choices must align with your maturity level, threat landscape, and operational model. So let's walk through the CSIRT toolchain by function, from detection to automation, case tracking to forensics. Each of these categories contributes to a well orchestrated response process. So, already So we have detection and monitoring. This includes themes like Splunk, QRadar, or others. EDS, EPS like Zeek and Suricata. I'll try to give more open source examples, and EDR, XDR platforms such as Wazoo or other. So these tools help identify threats in real time and form the foundation for incident detection and alert triage. Automation and response. So our tools like Cortex, XOR, or others from IBM or others, they automate repetitive tasks, enrich data, and execute playbooks. And these are critical for scaling a research response and reducing mean time to resolution known as the MTTR. And then we have the TIP or Threat Intel Platform. So CTI tools like Mace, Threat Connect, Open CTI, I think, and others they manage threat data, enrich incidents, and help analysts pivot on indicators. So they should support standards such as the STIX and TAXI and feed both human analysts and automation. We also have vulnerability management. Nessus, Qualys, or open source or free stuff like OpenVAS. They enable proactive identification of exposures combined with patch management, asset inventories, and so on. They help CSIRTs move from reactive to preventive modes. We also have secure communication. So during a crisis, communication is everything. Tools like Matrix, Signal, or even secure Teams or Slack channels with DLP as an example, they protect sensitive um, uh, coordination with executives, third parties, law enforcement, and so on. Another important capability area is the case and incident tracking, so such as the Hive, the RTIR, Jira with incident response plugins, ServiceNow, and so on. They provide structured workflows, audit logs, and evidence management, so enabling compliance and traceability. And it's very essential for forensic readiness. Then we have, of course, forensics and malware analysis. So autopsy for disk forensics, volatility for memory analysis, QCO sandbox for detonation, Hydra for reverse engineering, and so on and so on. These help investigate deeper and attribute malicious behavior accurately. And then comes knowledge base, knowledge management, and documentation. So wikis, SOP repositories, or runbook platforms ensure repeatability and help onboard new team members. And this institutional memory is key to long-term CSIRT success and effectiveness. So tool integration matters. A well-integrated CSIRT stack enables efficient alert to resolution workflow. As an example, from the SIEM to the SOAR to the TIP and then to the case manager. They have to be or they have to align the tech with maturity. So early stage CSIRTs should focus on essential tooling first, such as the SIEM and the case management. And then advanced CSIRTs can layer automation, Intel Fusion, and orchestration later. You can reference to the frameworks that we have mentioned for phased alignment. Then you have the worldwide debate, open source versus commercial. So tools like the Hive, Mist, OpenVAS, OpenCTI, Cortex, and so on. Cortex, etc., etc. These kind of tools they provide low-cost entry points, but as systems maturity and scale grow, commercial tools may offer better support, scalability, compliance features, and so on. So there is no shame in starting with open source because either way, you will be using open source tools, libraries, and platforms a way or another. Sharing standards such as tools that should support sticks, taxi, OpenIOC, and so on for external internal sharing and internal correlation. And of course, collaborative platforms that highlight engagement with platforms like Circle First, CSIRT Global, regional ESACs, and also community-based initiatives such as chapters and so on. So, CSIRT in context, stakeholder engagement and reporting structure. So, a CSIRT does not operate in a vacuum. Its effectiveness is tightly coupled to how well it interfaces with internal and external stakeholders. Clearly reporting lines, defined authority, and trusted communication channels are crucial to avoid chaos during critical incidents. And this slide explores how a CSIRT serves, who it reports to, and how these relationships vary across different CSIRT types and organizational models. So we have to start with establishing memoranda of understanding, MOUs with national CERTs, sectoral CSIRTs, law enforcement, external partners. It is vital. These agreements define how collaboration occurs during joint investigations, cross-border incidents, and information sharing under confidentiality, of course. And then we have, the CSIRT governance models vary. So in some organizations, a centralized CSIRT manages everything. In others, a federated model exists where business units or regional teams have embedded incident responders coordinated by a central authority. So choosing the right model affects authority, response time, and also scalability. And one of the most overlooked elements in CSIRT planning is the definition of crisis communication protocols, because during a major incident, CSIRT must know whom to contact, how securely, and what can or cannot be disclosed. And this includes establishing reputable and tamper-proof communication channels in a mature organization. And as an example, CSIRT should have visibility at the executive or board level. Not only should they report incidents and metrics, but they must also have the authority to trigger crisis response, activate recovery plans, and demand remediation when necessary. For national or sectoral CSIRTs, it is critical to emphasize the role of trusted constituencies. And these are vetted organizations or sectors with established trust relationships that enable intel or sensitive level intel exchange and escalation across organizational or national boundaries. And all of these stakeholder relationships must be codified in the official CSIRT charter. And the charter must define reporting lines, roles, authorities, expectations. The regular tabletop exercises and simulations also have to be conducted in order to ensure these relationships hold under pressure. The CSIRT charter, the laying foundation, the CSIRT charter, and the governance. So every effective CSIRT has to begin with a clear and enforceable charter. And this document defines not only the purpose and scope, but also its legitimacy, reporting structure, authority, and relationship to the broader organization, like we explained previously. So the charter ensures the CSIRT is not viewed as a silo technical function, but as a strategic component of the organization's risk, security, and resilience architecture. So a weak or undefined charter obviously will point out to a weak CSIR, and formalizing authority is non-negotiable. For sectoral national CSIRTs, legal mandate is critical. It may be defined in law or regulation, and the charter should explicitly cover scope boundaries, what's in scope and what's not. Include a charter review cycle as an example for every 12 or 24 months, and then board level endorsement. It will strengthen the buy-in and budgets, and you can use existing templates from the different institutions to accelerate the drafting process. And also the governance model option, it depends obviously on your own organizational context. So people behind the shield in terms of building your CSIRT dream team, because the success of a CSIRT depends less on the tools it uses and more on the people running it. So it's critical to build a multidisciplinary team with a mix of technical, analytical, legal, and communication skills. Depending on maturity and budget, these roles might not all be full time, but their functions must be covered either internally or through partnerships. So, organizations often underestimate the value of communication and legal expertise during incidents, and these roles are crucial for timely, compliant, and reputationally safe responses. For national or sectoral CSIRTs, the liaison role becomes strategic. It enables cooperation with international CERTs, intel agencies, and regulatory bodies. And also, upskilling and career progression should be planned in advance. Don't just build a CSIRT, try to sustain it. So, the key takeaways for building and operating a CSIRT in order to finalize our discussion today. For key takeaways, a CSIRT is not just a team, it is a strategic capability that aligns SecOps with governance, risk, and resilience goals. Every CSIRT needs and must be defined by a scope, services authority, and so on. Always try to use international frameworks. They will help you advance. Maturity is progressive, guys. So don't aim for excellence on day one, but try to build the foundational capabilities the right way, because this is the most important step. And CSIRT must be embedded within enterprise and national cyber ecosystems to enable effective collaboration, escalation, and information exchange. So best practices for building and operating a CSIRT. Define your CSIRT services functions and constituency clearly. Choose the right governance model, use maturity models, develop playbooks, MOUs, and crisis communication protocols early. Don't wait until you are under attack because it will be too late, believe me. Prioritize continuous training, simulations, and cross team coordination. Establish the trusted external partnerships and periodically review your CSIRT charter, stakeholders, contact trees, and so on. From knowledge to action, try to be the catalyst for cyber resilience. So don't wait for a breach. Start building your CSIRT today. Map your current response capabilities, establish the formal CSIRT, train your team, test your response, and learn from each simulation. Engage with the global community, and let's transform response from reactive firefighting to proactive resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this session has shifted how you think about incident response from a chaotic process to a capability you can architect and mature strategically. Take one idea from today, whether it's defining your CSIRT charter, assessing with the different frameworks, or engaging with FIRST and Africa CERT and so on, and put it into action next week. CSIRTs don't start perfect. They start with intent, structure, and leadership. And ladies and gentlemen, that can be you. Thank you for being here. Let's keep learning, building, and defending. Before we close, I want to make sure you can reach me directly if you want to continue the discussion, collaborate, or get support on building or maturing your CSIR, designing a cyber strategy, or aligning with international frameworks. I'm Taher I've dedicated my career to empowering organizations and professionals across Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and the US, and beyond in the fields of InfoSec, cyber, GRC, and resilience. Here are my contact details, whether it's the email, the website, the phone number, also available in WhatsApp. And thank you again for listening. This session was supported by EKSEC Group and our chapters, CSA Algeria, OWASP Algiers, and the CAS Algeria. Let's stay connected, collaborate, and build strong cyber capabilities together. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, again for your attention, your time, and your commitment to cyber excellence. And hopefully, I will be seeing you very soon in the next one. Peace out.